of the DFS Fantasy Super Show. I am your host, Walter Waddell, aka Doug Deuces, aka the Duke of Niche Sports, as Pete likes to say. Back with another Olympic women's basketball DFS slate. We are through the group stage into the knockout stage, so we have a 4-game slate left. I think this is probably second to last 4-game slate in women's because the semifinals may be combined with the men's, I'm hearing. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what's going on with that. Probably not, but if not, this is probably the last 4-gamer. Lots to talk about. Pricing is very soft. If you guys are watching live, definitely leave any comments, questions, concerns on the right side there in the live chat. If you're watching on demand, go ahead and pop into our Discord on yourfielderschoice.com. Talk to me there on their general chat if you want to join in to be a sub in the premium chat. We are running a promotion right now where it's 50% off your first 2 months. If you're paying $25, and a lot of sites charge you that for one, maybe 2 sports. We're going to offer everything for you. So NFL, college football, college basketball, Aussie sports, soccer. If it's a sport with DFS, esports, and you can make money at it, we're probably offering it. With that comes articles, of course, cheat sheets, premium subscriber only shows from time to time, pretty much anything that you need, lineup help, construction, stuff like that, core plays. So lots of good stuff there for you. A big summer ahead, the rest of summer, I should say, with fall and college football preview shows will be starting probably next week. We also have Canadian football on tap here. The first slate coming up this week. We're going to be doing a show on Wednesday. Pete will be back joining me for that. We'll be breaking down the first slate for you. It's right around the corner, as in 24 to 48 hours. So very excited about that as well. For this last 4-game slate for the women's side, and I'm still offering men's side stuff as well, just so you guys are aware. Last article went up. I'll be, putting out content for that as the next couple of days comes out as the Olympics finishes strong. 2K to first, 941 person tournament here on DraftKings for $10. That gets you, a few entries in for that chance at getting a 2K, pretty nice size. Everything else is a little small as usual, but a nice little flagship tournament there for you to run some multiple lineups. Pricing is like I said, very soft. They dropped pretty much everyone, which is unfortunate because there's going to be a lot of overlap yet again. At this point in the game, there's a lot of box scores to look at. A lot of the lineups last night were very chalky, and they were just people who played, players who have done well. So you can, just look at box scores, and that's what they're doing. They're hunting it. So you got to get different somewhere. We were able to get different last night with Jasmine Guathmay from Puerto Rico. She ended up playing 39 minutes of a possible 40, only 4-2. She was about 28% on a 4-game slate. That's low enough. She put up, 39, 40 fantasy points, big time performance. So if you used her, you probably cashed. Unfortunately, our other sneaky play, Ezzy Magbagor from Australia, was in habitual foul trouble. She had 4 fouls, only played roughly 17 to 18 minutes. She did have 19 fantasy points, but that killed it because the cash line was 203, and there's a lot of ties. So with the main lineup we ran, it was like, and a lot of them 202, 204. So ended up splitting with a lot of people. Thankfully, cash games were safe. So I always recommend doing head-to-heads and whatnot. But at this point, there's going to be a lot of overlap because of the box scores. Men's side is a little easier to get different because you had Luka Doncic priced over 13K. Ricky Rubio over 10K. A lot of expensive people. But on the women's side, they just don't have that. So it's easy to make a lineup. So we're going to go through here and start with the first game. There's a 4-game slate, like I mentioned. We're in the quarterfinal rounds. At this point, it's win or go home. Serbia versus China. China looks really good. They're -1.5 right now on the DraftKings Sportbook. It does have the second lowest over-under at 145.5. Pretty much a coin flip game on paper. Now, I thought that last night with Belgium, they were -1.5 against China, that they would win, and comfortably, because I'm very confident in Julie Oliman, very confident in Emma Miesemann. But this Chinese squad is very good on defense, vicious on defense. They also have a front court that's almost as tall as the U.S. They have a couple girls that are much taller than them as well. And there's a chance that they beat Serbia here. Serbia is a very renowned squad in international competition on the women's side. They have a lot of veterans. They're very good in the FIBA style of play. So, I think a lot of old heads will think Serbia is going to win this game, but the way China's playing, I really wouldn't, sleep on them. It's determined, for me at least, the Serbian side is very bad on DFS. They've had 2+ matchups in their group stage, and they just really didn't perform. Now they won. They went 2-1 in group, but with the South Korea, or the Republic of Korea, as they want to be known right now. They beat them 65-61. They were one of the top DVPs in the entire slate, or in Olympics, I should say. All bigs were kind of tearing them up. Sonia Vasich comes in and plays against Korea, 32 minutes, her typical time, but she only had 18 and a half fantasy points, which is just an abomination. Her price has gone down to 9.6 from 10.5, but the fact that Serbia keeps on eking games out, they play kind of a balanced style of play. It's really hurting them for DFS. Yvonne Anderson was okay at 9.2. Krajinic is kind of overpriced, and Anna Dabovic is really the only other fantasy viable play. But like I said, they're all hovering between 16 to 22 fantasy points, and I just can't see any way to justify paying these prices 9.7, 9.6, 9.2 for the top three when you have Asia Wilson, Brianna Stewart, Emma Miesemann on the same price bucket. Before Stewart was over 10K, she's dropped under 10K for some reason. So you would have to be a very big lunatic to play Tina Krajinic, who's averaging 18.5 fantasy points, over Brianna Stewart for the same price. Now, I'm a big-time leverage player. I love fading chalk when it makes sense. I will eat chalk when it makes sense, and I'll find my leverage, like last night with our value Jasmine Guathmay from Puerto Rico. But I won't just be different to be different. So Serbia is really not going to be on my radar. I suspect most people will be fading them. Really, the only player that's viable would be Yvonne Anderson, and that's only if you're playing multiple lineups 5+. She has the best scorer on the team, but at 9.2, she's really not doing a whole lot for me. So probably looking elsewhere. Jump over to the China side. They're really cheap. They have a 6'10 player in Zuhan, 6'8, 6'9, a couple other players in their front court. She doesn't start. She's still kind of developing. She's been slow in the past. They don't play her as many minutes. In the Puerto Rico game, she played 19 minutes, but she put up 31 points. And she's played 12 minutes in back-to-back games, but she's been solid in those 12. She's averaging well over a fantasy point per minute. Problem is she's 7'9". That's another one that if you think she's going to get more minutes, the Serbian team isn't quite as fast. They have a lot of size, so maybe this is a game where Zuhan plays more minutes. You know, if she were to see 25, she would absolutely end the slate. So I don't want you to completely write her off, depending on how many lineups you're going to run, but she's certainly not a main play. We'll probably likely see the starter in the front court, Euro Lee, who's only 5'3", get a lot of ownership. She did have kind of a down game for her against Belgium, which I thought might happen because of Belgium's front court, but she still had a 14-8-1 game, 24 fantasy points, which is solid for her. The price inexplicably has dropped to 5.3, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, especially when you incorporate her game against Puerto Rico, where she scored 43 fantasy points, and then the game against Australia in a surprise win with 31 fantasy points. So 5.3 is a really cheap price for her. I've been riding the Ezi Magbagor train, but Australia will be playing USA, which we'll be talking about here in a second. Ezi's really in the same price bucket as Euro Lee and has been throughout the entire tournament, and I've really leaned on Ezi more, but I think now is the time where I'm going to start switching over to Euro now because I'm not really a big fan of the matchup against USA. But we'll talk about what France did against them, and maybe we can get some Australia GPP exposure. So Euroleague at 5'3", definitely the one to get exposure to. Everybody else on China outside of Han or Euro are just okay plays. Like Meng Li at 6'7", she's a consistent 20 fantasy point scorer. Not somebody that you're really going to be looking at too heavily. And then at 4'7", Ziyu Wang, she plays right around 20 minutes per game. She had a 30 at one point against Australia. She averages right around 19 to 20 fantasy points. So China's solid. I think this will probably be one of those rock fight type games where you're going to see them hit each other in the mouth. There's probably going to be a high number of fouls. I don't really want a ton of exposure here outside of, as I mentioned, EuroLeague. So if you take one name out of this game, that's who I want you to look at and putting in your main lineup. All right, for the more glamorous game, everybody's going to be watching that. I'll be tweeting about that. Very critical of the USA team, playing one of their arch rivals in Australia. Australia, of course, snuck in. They had to win by like 18 plus last night against Puerto Rico to knock out Canada and get in by by differential, because they're both 1 and 2, by point differential, I should say. Price got the DFS in my mind. And they had a bad first half, and then they kind of turned it on because Puerto Rico is just too small, and they were able to do it. So they advanced, and what do they get for advancing? But they have to play the number 1 seeded United States. So that's going to be tough for them. Starting with the USA side, first let's talk about the line. US is minus 15 on DraftKings, 159.5 over under. Should be a lot of points scored here. They know these Australian squad really well. You've heard me talk in the previous show and in my article. They don't have Liz Cambridge, but Australia has a lot of WNBA players, current WNBA players on the team. Rebecca Allen, Leilani Mitchell, Ezzy Magbagor, who Brianna Stewart, Jewel Royd, and Sue Bird all know really well because they played together on the Storm. So it'll be really interesting to see that, and Stephanie Talbot as well. So this Australia team has players. They just have not looked good at all, except for that second half yesterday against Puerto Rico. So it'll be interesting to see if they mirror the France game plan against the United States. And I didn't want to mention that because France gave them a tough game last night. France was hanging in there till the very end, despite foul trouble to their main big Bruta. And really what they did, obviously they were shooting kind of red hot to start, but they were banging down low with the United States, and they were taking advantage of the coach, Don Staley's inability to play Brittany Griner big minutes. And nobody knows why she won't play Brittany Griner big minutes. She's the best big on the team. Every time they take Griner out, though, they immediately give up points, go into a deficit. Griner's plus 19 for the tournament now. So I think if they're going to mess around and play just Asia Wilson down low, or they were running a little bit of Tina Charles with Sylvia Fowles last night to give them size, they could run themselves into trouble against Australia. So coaching hasn't been good. I think U.S. has eked out games just because of their talent. If they didn't have the ton of talent they did, and they've had really bad guard play, I think they would have lost that France game yesterday. But pricing-wise on U.S., looking at chalk, as usual, Brianna Stewart's 9-9, which makes no sense for her to drop from 10-4, 10-5 to 9-9. I mean, all she's done is put up 30, 40 fantasy points every game. Expect her to be very highly owned. She plays every minute of the game. Stewie's a really good fade in WNBA because she's always 60, 70% owned. She was a really good fade in the first Olympic slate here against Nigeria when she was that, and she only put up 30. But you see the game after that against Japan, she played 34 minutes, scored 47 fantasy points, and then she played all but 1 minute against France, scored 38. She's shooting horrifically right now. She's been having it tough. She got her percentage up to 43% last night, but she had been shooting like 35 for the tournament. But it's going to be hard to really fade her. In GPPs, maybe, but in these single entry stuff and head-to-heads, you're going to have to play her. And you're also going to have to play Asia Wilson, who priced at 9.8. She should really be priced at 11K up there with Emma Mieseman. She's got 2 double-doubles on the season, or on the Olympic season. She's been over 40 points in every single game. She's actually averaging 43.5. The reigning MVP of the WNBA from last season has really made a statement. I didn't think she was going to be this good. A lot of people thought, she was going to be kind of a mediocre play at best, third, fourth, maybe even fifth option on his team, and she really hasn't. She's been the main option at times over Stewie, and of course the second option. So you have to run Asia Wilson. You're going to be seeing extreme chalk. Even people who don't play women's basketball DFS, they're playing it now to get exposure, play, get action. Everybody wants to get action during this Olympics. Everybody has that FOMO, fear of missing out, right? So you're going to see every lineup at least 60% or more with Stewart and Asia Wilson starting there. What I did was I ran those two last night, and then I ran an alt with Brittany Griner just because I don't want to give up on Griner, because if there does come the game where she plays 25 minutes, she will absolutely melt the slate with a 50 bomb. So I'll probably do the same thing again tomorrow night. I'll run an alt with Griner. I don't expect her to play more than 20 minutes, unfortunately, because that's just the pattern. We see 20, 16, and 19. She had a 34 fantasy point game against Nigeria in 20 minutes, a 24 fantasy point game in 16 minutes against Japan, and then her worst game yet against France, 16 fantasy points in just 19 minutes. She couldn't get going on the glass. That was a team that Japan and Nigeria didn't have size, so she kind of owned them. France did have size. Facing off against this Australia team, they have size as well. So we could see Griner do a little bit more damage here. 9.5 is not the greatest price when you only a couple hundred more. You can go and get Asia or Stewart. But again, Griner's been 25 to maybe 30% owned at most, compared to 70% owned of the other two. So of their big three, leverage-wise, Brittany Griner. Tina Charles had her best game of the Olympics last night. Not necessarily believing that she is a play per se. She did have 28 and 19 last night. She hit 3 threes. They may start playing her more, though, because if they, run into another hot shooting team, because Australia is full of 3-point shooters, just like France was, maybe they bring out Charles for size, because she can shoot over people of how tall she is, and she can hit 3 with confidence. So I kind of like Charles as maybe a GPP play as well. As far as the USA guards go, they're awful. You can't really play Sue Bird. She's shooting horribly. Skylar Diggins-Smith barely plays. Diana Taurasi re-injured herself last night, her wrist this time, so she's only 3'9". Typically, you look at Diana Taurasi and see 3'9" and think that's a must play, but she's really just not a factor. This is her fifth and probably last Olympics, her and Sue Bird. It's just that's not going well. They could have brought. There's a lot of debate in the community, the WNBA, women's basketball in general, about how Taurasi and Sue Bird probably shouldn't have been invited. It was more of a, this is your last Olympics, hurrah type invite, and it's shown. The U.S.'s guard play has been really bad. They're getting absolutely nothing from their guard play consistently. Sometimes Chelsea Gray does well, and then Sue Bird maybe hits a three once in a while, but you really can't use any of them. The only guard I would recommend playing is maybe Jewel Lloyd at 4K. If Diana Taurasi's banged up, can't go for whatever reason, Lloyd instantly would see a minutes boost. We saw the game against Japan. She saw a minutes boost of 27 after Skylar Diggins-Smith was hurt for one game. And then the game against France when Taurasi hurt her wrist, Lloyd was the first sub up and in, played 24 minutes. So she will get those minutes at 4K. She wasn't as good as value play as, Guathmay last night, which we touched on, or probably Gabby Williams, who we're going to talk about when we get to the France game, but she's definitely there. On the Australia side, still fading Becca Allen and Leilani Mitchell. Their prices have started to come down to a playable level now. Mitchell at one point was priced, 7.5, 7.6. Now she's down to 7K. Still not playable. She's not really having a very good Olympics. Becca Allen is just having a horrific Olympics. Prize Picks is trying to bait us into these. Whenever you see a mid-teens fantasy total on Prize Pick for a player that typically plays 25 to 30 minutes, you think it's a lock, but she's having trouble getting even 10 fantasy points lately. So those two are really the ones to ignore up top. And then you go to the second line of players for Australia. And that starts with Kayla George, whose price has dipped to 6'3". She has two out of her last three over 30 fantasy points, averaging 33. She's a really talented big. She's benefited probably even more than Ezzy has with the departure of Liz Cambridge. She took 17 shots last night against Puerto Rico, which was pretty impressive. As we mentioned, Puerto Rico had a very short front court. Bigs had taken advantage of them. I thought it might be Ezzy, but it ended up being Kayla, 19, 7, and 5. And she shoots threes. She hit 3 of 6 last night. She's actually got 8 in 3 games, so she's a versatile big in that way. She's the type of player. Last night, if you guys watched France, they're bigs that can come out and hit threes. And jumpers in general. Rupert, the youngster that been drafted by Las Vegas, George kind of mirrors her game a little bit. I could see Kayla George being a very tough person to guard for the Americans. She probably won't be that owned, even though she's got good logs. That's somebody that I'm definitely zeroing in on for my alt lineup. As I mentioned, Ezzy, always love her at 5'5". She's motivated. She's going to play her Storm teammates. She's a good player. She was just in that, like I said, massive foul trouble. She played only 17 minutes. I'm kind of shaking that off. Ezzy's more of just a GPP play at this point because of the minutes issued that with the foul. She had 4 fouls against Puerto Rico, 3 in each game before that. So there's really no doubt in my mind she'll probably pick up 2 in that first half tomorrow against guarding Griner or Stewart, Asia. Fouls. There's an endless supply of bigs USA can run against Australia. As he's still developing, you see she had that high of 33 against Belgium, which was impressive, only 19 yesterday. If she were to play 30 minutes, I think she'd get there at 5'5" pretty easily, but it's a big risk. There's a foul risk for her for sure. And then as far as other plays go, Jenna O'Haye's the three-point shooter for Australia. You saw yesterday she was banging home some threes. She had her tournament best 32 fantasy points, hit 4 threes, a 15-5-4 stat line. 3.8. There is potential for people to chase that. I would advise against it. It's a nice prize. We now lose Guathmay because Puerto Rico's out. Some of the other value plays off the board that we've had in the past. There is a player for Japan I'm going to talk about in a second with Machida that is a better play. So I would be hesitant to chase her because she is really relying on threes. However, three-point shooters have been dicing the hell out of USA in all 3 games. So there's a good chance that she does perform, and it's only 3.8. But I feel like that's one of those let everybody else chase it and stay away. I do like Katie Ebster, even though she had her worst game in the season yesterday. She's kind of a big time shooter as well. She's taken 26 shots in 3 games. Kind of taken and kicked Becca Allen out of the lineup there in the rotation. She comes off the bench, but you see she's averaging over 28 minutes per game. So 4.8 Ebster is definitely somebody to consider. Maybe like a mini game stack here because it is going to be the highest scoring game in the slate. And 2 things are going to happen. There's really no middle ground. US is either going to get out early and just blow them out, blow the doors off them, and Australia's going to get dejected. or Australia's going to win. I don't think there's going to be any, they're trading buckets back and forth, back and forth. I think it's going to be Australia shocks the hell out of US, or the other way around, US shocks them. I just get the feeling that's going to be a blowout on one side or the other. Probably not going to be the US that gets blown out. All right, next game on the slate, Belgium versus Japan. Belgium's plus 2.5 on DraftKings. I think they may have gone up since I just looked at it like 30 minutes ago. 151 over and under. Tough loss against China. I tweeted out before the game, this is really going to show us if they're pretenders or contenders here against China. And you know what? They must have been pretenders because they got waxed a bit. They lost by 12 to China. It was a close game at halftime within 2. They had a really awful third quarter. And then the fourth quarter, I believe they scored like 8 to 10 points in the fourth, and the game was over. So now facing off against Japan, a much smaller team than China. Belgium has the front court advantage there, at least in height. Japan's a 3-point shooting team, and they play fast. So this is going to be similar to the game where Belgium played against Australia, the first game, where it was a faster pace. They had a little bit of an advantage. They had a nice 15-point win over Australia. Emma Miesemann melted the slate with 60. Even a tough game in the loss against China last night, she still put up 42. So 10-1, she dropped $900 since last night. Explain that one to me, other than DK trying to rake us. That's okay. But you got to play Miesemann. So lineups, you're looking at Miesemann, Brianna Stewart, and Asia Wilson. Those are going to be the 3 chalk people in every lineup that you see. It's been the same every single slate pretty much. So I'm not giving away anything secret. Just know that you're going to be playing 2v2, maybe 3v3 if people jump off of Oliman now, but 2v2 for sure. Julie Oliman's price dropped down to 7-3 after a pretty bad game for her. I was super confident in her price picks total of 25, and she had some turnovers, only got to, I think, 19 on price picks, 21 on DraftKings. I'm not really worried about that. I'm expecting a big bounce back game from her. You see, against Puerto Rico, she had 30. Against Australia, she had 43. I'm really not expecting her to hit 40 too often because of the way that she plays. She's more of a drive and dish type of player. She gets steals, a couple of rebounds. 10 or 11 points. She's not a big-time scorer. So she kind of went over her skill level a bit against Australia. That game there against Puerto Rico, though, was right in her wheelhouse, that 10, 6, and 7 game. Those are the type of stats she would put up in her rookie season for Indiana all the time, like a 9-point, 4 or 5 rebound, 9 assist type of game. And if she gets something like that with a couple assists and she cans 1 or 2 triples, she's going to be well over 5x at 7-3. So I'm staying on the Oliman train. Try not to give you guys a complete lineup here, but you may end up figuring it out. But Oliman is definitely going to be somebody that I'm staying invested in. She was 28% on that first slate when she gave me a 43, and then the last 2 slates she's been heavy chalk because people have game logs, of course. People went into it not knowing who the hell she was or anything about Belgium, and that was the edge for us. So I'm still on Oliman train with Miesemann. Those two are a package deal for me. You can start looking at Kim Mesta. She seems to have kind of found herself now. The last 2 games, she's still been really, really good, averaging right around 27 fantasy points in that stretch. She's taken, 16 shots against China, 11 against Puerto Rico after shooting 1 for 8 against Australia. So Belgium had a really good game against Aussies. She didn't, but the last 2 games, she's looked really, really good. And she's adding, steals, rebounds, assists, all that kind of stuff. So Kim Mesta at 7-6 is your GPP play, or you're completely pivot off of Oliman. Say you're only running 1 lineup, but you don't want to be the same as everyone else. Just run Mesta over Oliman. I don't think it's to the point now where the field is going to go all run to Mesta. I think Oliman's still probably going to see 40 to 50%, but Mesta at that 15 to 18% range is looking pretty juicy because if she gets hot, like she has been the last 2 games, she's going to outscore Oliman for only $300 more and potentially 40% less ownership. Everybody else on Belgium is pretty much in a void. Kim Mesta's sister, Hanny, has been kind of hot from 3-point range 2 games ago, but she's strictly just a shooter, so I probably wouldn't touch her. It's just the top 3 there. Makes it real easy. Miesemann, Mesta, and Oliman. For Japan, the home country making the quarterfinal, they've had some good games, man. They really have surprised. That big win over Nigeria, I thought Nigeria would cover, and they didn't because they were so hot. They were hot against the Americans. They ended up fading there, losing 86-69. And then they beat France by 4, 74-70. So they've been having a really good event. I think that the top value play now becomes that we don't have Guathmay is Rui Machida. Her price is kind of plateaued as well at 4.7. She's not a big scorer. You can see yesterday she scored 0 points, but still got 26 fantasy points. So that's a very high floor you have to work with there. She's an excellent passer. She has 15 assists yesterday. It's not an outlier. Her first 2 games, she had 11 each. She's averaging over 12 and a half assists. She's going to give you a couple of rebounds. Every once in a while, she'll score some points, but she's typically going to just make value at this price on assists alone, which is pretty impressive, all things considered. Looking at assists, she is by far the top assist in the event. She's averaging, like I said, 12.3, which is 5 higher than the next, which is Sue Bird at 7.5, and Oliman at 7.3 assists. So extremely efficient. Her assist per 40 number is 20. And assist to turnover ratio is 4.1, which is second best in the tournament behind Leilani Mitchell, of all people. So I like her a lot, 4.7. I think she'll probably end up being pretty chalky, considering you look at her game log, see she hasn't been under 26 once and hasn't scored more than 9 points once. Makes you pretty comfortable playing her. Yesterday it was a hot shooting game from Saki Hayashi. I hope people chase that. She hit 7 of 11 triples. Most of those were in the first half. Japan came out shooting 63% from long range in that first half against Nigeria, and then they pulled away late. So let people chase that. 5'9" for Hayashi. I'm not about that. I'm not going to be playing her. In fact, Japan usually has a pretty deep rotation to the point that everybody else cannibalizes each other, to the point where you're going to see a bunch of 16, 17, 18 fantasy point scorers. And there's nobody super high priced here, but you're just not going to cash with an 18, 19. When you have a slate like this where the pricing is so easy to make a really good looking lineup, no matter what you do, if you hit somebody under 20, regardless of price, it's going to be really hard for you to definitely not bink, but possibly not even profit. We saw a lot of lineups within 2 to 3 points last night where the cash line was, like I said, 203. And people that were tied for that 203 were winning $3 back on a $10 entry, and then people with 2 points less with Ezzy or something didn't cash at all. So the margin for error is a lot less now, where our edge was much wider at the beginning of this tournament. We were cashing every night, binking and all that. It's because people now have information at their fingertips, and there's really not a lot of sneaks left. So that's where we're going to want to pivot to these other plays in your alt lineups, like a grinder. We know grinder is going to be 20%, as I mentioned. So that's really where you're going to want to try to get edge now, is playing people that are either coming off a bad game, are in a weird price bucket that are just going to get ignored by people, or we already know most lineups are going to start with Oliman, Meesman, Stewart, and Asia Wilson. So use that knowledge to your advantage, and either, okay, I'm going to 2v2 everyone and maybe be in the same situation as last night, or switch out Oliman for Mesta, or Meesman for somebody else. Probably wouldn't do that, but the Oliman for Mesta is a way to get different. So Rui Machida, though, 4.7, excellent play. Definitely like her. And then the last game on the slate here, France versus Spain. This is going to be a close one. We have France -1, over under of 140, so by far the lowest. These two teams are very good on defense. I'm actually a pretty big fan of Spain here. I have been of France. There's a couple players on France that I actually really like, which I'll talk about here in a second, but this Spain team is really strong, and they have a chance to make a deep run, starting with the tougher game against France. I think if we get that, +1 Spain, or if it goes the other way to the point where we're getting 2 or 3 for Spain, I think it's time to start putting a hefty sum of change on Spain. Astu Endu is 9K. That's one of the few people they've actually seemingly priced right. She was 7K to start the tournament, 54, 46, 32. It's nice that she's there at 9K because it's going to force people to really, decide. You're going to take Asia Wilson and Emma Meesman and Breanna Stewart, or are you going to play an Astu Endu? I still think we're going to see those 4 in a lot of lineups. So if that means that Stu Endu is going to be lower owned, that might be your edge play right there. Big fan of hers. I'll certainly be trying to fit her in. She's matchup proof against anyone. So even against France, I'm really not concerned. This is where it gets tricky for Spain. Laura Gill is 8'6". Christina Uvina is 8'8". Uvina has been a very consistent fantasy option. She's been scoring over 30 fantasy points pretty much every game. The last game she had against Canada, she had 15, 2, and 7. She had 7 turnovers. She does a lot of poor choices. She gets herself up in the air and then tries to fling a pass out, double clutch in and getting stuck, and that's where that leads to the turnovers. But I just know there's going to be no ownership on her, and she has a legit 40 in her bag. We're looking at a close game against France. Even though the point total is low, it doesn't matter because Spain runs a really tight rotation, which I'm confident in. So I think I want some Movina exposure in my multiple lineups. And then that same goes for Laura Gill. Nice thing about Laura Gill, she plays monster minutes, 38, 36, and 32 and 3 straight. That's minutes. And then 37 fantasy points, 21 fantasy points, and 40. So she's going to play big minutes. She's not a big shooter for them, but she's heavy on the glass. She's averaging 9 rebounds. She's averaging almost 4 assists, just under 2 blocks a game. And then steals is where she racks up a ton. She's averaging over 2 steals per game. So peripheral wise, Laura Gill is much stronger than Uvino, but scoring wise, Uvino is much stronger than Gill. So that's where you really want to make that decision. What do you value more? A high scorer, the game maybe not be high scoring, or peripherals, we're going to see a lot of, rebounding, physicality, steals, turnovers. Maybe it's Laura Gill. So definitely a Gill fan. And then my girl, Alba Torrens, if you guys follow me on Twitter, you guys see I'm talking about her quite a bit. I'm a big fan of her. She's a legend for women's basketball. She's a really good player. I know she left a bad taste in people's mouth that first game when she shot 1 for 10. She came right back with a 33 against Serbia, and then against Canada, 23. She played that 25 minutes in a game where they already had it set. Look for her to play similar to that Serbia game, 30, 35 minutes. She's going to play a big amount of minutes. I'm very confident in that. Very solid value play, right up there with Machida. That's going to spread things out enough. I think that it's probably going to be Machida as the highest owned value, Gabby Williams in this game we're going to talk about, and then Alba Torrens. So and then Jewel Lloyd. So Torrens, who's one of my favorite values, is near the bottom. That's where we can get some of our, leverage over the rest of the field. You take a look at her shot attempts. She's taken 36 shot attempts in 3 games. The volume is there regardless of minutes. She only shot 10% in the first game, but you look at that, 56% against Serbia, 50% against Canada. She's hit it 5 threes since then. She's taken 12. And she does just enough in other categories like rebounds and assists to be a pretty lethal 4.3 player. So she's going to go way under-owned, and I think people are going to be sleeping on Spain. I think the Spain stack could wind up being a GPP winner. On the France side of things, Gabby Williams, let's start down there. She's 4'8". Every time I write her off or think that she's going to come back down to earth, she goes off again. Japan, she had 33, which 4 steals. All right, she's not going to get 4 steals again. Against Nigeria, 35, 3 steals. Okay, that's not going to happen. Against America, 6 steals, 34 fantasy points. Her stat line was pedestrian, 10, 5, and 3, but you throw 6 steals on there, and then, she does some damage. So very active defender. She's always around the ball. She plays the passing lanes. This is somebody that you could, start to predict steals for. And at 4'8", she's going to be popular. She's actually averaging 4.5 steals per game, which is obviously not something that is going to continue. You don't think, but I mean, it's a short tournament. Maybe it does. She's going to play 30 minutes. She's taken double-digit shots. She's taken no less than 10 shots in any of the games, averaging right around 6 rebounds. So 4'8". She's a really high-level, strong 4'8" play. Expect heavy ownership on her. Spain is tough, though. I do feel like, and I say this every time, she's finally going to start slowing down. I think Spain has the chops and the defensive pressure to make things tough for her. But if Gabby's going to continue to play 30, 32 minutes, she'll probably volume her way into value some way, form, or shape, or other. And then Marine Johannes, that's my favorite player. You can't really use her in cash, unfortunately. She is contracted with the New York Liberty. She played there her rookie year. The last 2 seasons she's been playing overseas. She has, kind of chosen that over America. Hopefully she goes to WNBA and plays with Sabrina Ionescu because that'd be a sick backcourt. Those of you who watched the game against US, she played the most minutes she has in the event so far, 28. She did take 12 shots, looked pretty good there. She's just a playmaker, man. She's driving down the lanes, making fancy passes, super athletic, electric player. She's still pretty raw. You saw her with a lot of kind of, wacky, over the top layups, or bad shots. But she is a really high upside player that everybody that is involved or watches WNBA or anything to do with WNBA wants her back away from France and back in the WNBA. So she's a high level GPP play at 6'8". This is a do or die game for France. You see, there's a lot of confusion about why she only played 16 against Japan. They lost. I think they're going to regret that one because they got such a tough draw. She played 23 against Nigeria, still didn't start, and then against America, a tougher game where they were battling it out and had to get within a certain amount of point differentials to make the quarterfinals. She played 28. I think she's going to play 30, 32 minutes tomorrow. It would be very silly not to, and it won't take foul trouble. So expect Johannes to come in and be like 8% owned with a possibility for a 30-plus fantasy point game at 6'8". Very strong play. We did get to see Ileana Rupert come in because there's foul trouble with Gruda and have a nice game against US. She had 15 fantasy points. This is just a really deep French team in terms of their substitution patterns. They do a lot of hockey-style subs. They have people come in for 3-minute shifts and then come out. Gruda, Mayam, Jolai's sister, her name is very hard to say, Vukasavalic, I think is how you say that. Found out yesterday she was Jolai from Gonzaga's sister. She's a very strong player. It's just tough to play any of them. I guess if you were going to play somebody outside of Gabby or Johannes, it'd probably be Gruda. Cedrine Gruda is their main big. She was in foul trouble early yesterday. She just hasn't had that ceiling game. And I had talked about her heading into this slate yesterday. She just hasn't had that ceiling game that we know she's capable of. She did play her least amount of minutes at 21, just 21 fantasy points. Before that, she had back-to-back 30s. She's only 5'6", though. So for 100 more than Ezzy, I think I'm probably a little bit safer with Gruda. However, as I mentioned, Spain's defense I probably respect the most, even more so than a team like USA. And I feel like they have the chops to slow this France team down and keep most of their fantasy scores below that 4.5, 5x number that you're really going to need. Typically in WNBA play, 3.5 to 4x gets the job done. But with pricing as bad as it is, and you can play whoever you want, you really need 5x or more, which is typical of winning GPPs in college basketball and other sports like that, NBA or whatnot. So keep that in mind if you're looking for ways to be different. Do so, but don't also shoot yourself in the foot with a player like Gruda that's really probably going to hit 28, which won't be enough. Even at 5'6", it's a good number when you needed 35. All right, there's no prize picks for this yet. Those are the 4 games. Core-wise, I'll give you guys that haven't subbed yet a freebie. It's kind of obvious. Emma Meesman, I think you got to play her. And then I think I'm playing Asia Wilson. I may kind of buck the Stewart-Asia Wilson chalk duo there and just play one USA player and go with a Stu and do. I'm going to do a little bit more investigating. You guys know I talk to a lot of people around the industry and kind of try to get a gauge for what's going on, who's going to be played, kind of build my own ownership projections a little bit like that just from talking to folks and reading articles from media members. So I think a Stu and do at 9K is the player that I am going to be playing for a slight discount of $900 from Breanna Stewart. And then, like I said, Asia Wilson's probably my favorite USA player right now, with Brittany Griner being my favorite leverage play. And as far as value goes, Rui Machida is number 1 by far. Probably Gabby Williams is the ownership. Gabby Williams is more my third, though, with Alba Torrens being my second favorite value. So a good core group of players there. I will be writing this into an article for the morning time to be released, so you guys can, if there's anything that you watch the show that you need a little bit more intel about, or you wanted to put, numbers to your eyes there, I will have that out for you guys nice and early, along with the prize picks when they drops. And then a few wagers. I'm talking to G. He's going to be releasing the wagering stuff, and we're going to include maybe a player or two from this Olympics. We've been doing pretty well with that. So speaking of G, I appreciate it. He comes together at short notice to do some production for us. He's coming through in a big way. You guys showed a lot of support to the video yesterday. We had 20 plus likes. Doesn't sound like a lot, but we're getting there. And 130 plus views. So we're definitely appreciative of that. A lot of you guys were very supportive. So hit that like if you're watching this live or on demand. That helps us out with the algo a lot and the views in general. Retweet us if you can. Show us that support, and we'll keep making that Miss Sport money. I'm DubDeuce85 at gmail.com and on every socials. Walter Waddell. Call me Walt, Niche Sports Extraordinaire, Big Dummy, whatever you want to call me. Just don't call me late for dinner, as they say from Pete. Pete will be back this Wednesday for a CFL show. I think I'll have some MLB stuff too. That Canadian football show, if you're going to play this year, you're not going to want to miss that. We have some very good info for you already. I'm excited. But thanks, everybody. Take care. Let's win some of that money before it's gone. See ya.
Yeah. No pressure. No pressure. Yeah. All we do is dress and rest. Yeah. Shit, we on fresh dressed, living large, German whips in my garage. Most my partners caught the charge for all this love like Elder Bars. Fresh dressed, living large, German whips in my garage. Most my partners caught the charge for all this love like Elder. We keep jigs outside of my stoop. We keep it rockin'. They love to give us some play. We keep it rockin'. Homeboy, we got 'em.
Hit the club, roll with me, we gon' hit the club. I'm back now, my Mac down, on black like my background. From the back door to the VIP, no charge, I'm VIP. Jesse James don't need ID, reppin' FAM9D. Now go hop in the truck though, baby girl gon' move on your butt though. And you know I'm still rollin' with the thugs though, so holla if you need, cause I'm cutthroat. All about the paper, see you later, cause I don't wanna date her. Nah, that's not my flavor, and I'm high as a T.O. skyscraper. You know, hop in the Bentley or Rolls Royce, you know, hop in the whip with a couple bad chicks, you know, and I'll be lit all day, all night, you know, that's how we roll.
Fresh dressed, living large, German whips in my garage. Most my partners caught to charge for all this love like elder bars. Fresh dressed, living large, German whips in my garage. Most my partners caught to charge for all this love like elder bars.
German whips, fancy cars, they play the game but they know who the champions are. Every time we pull up it's like a damn bazaar. They scream our name, try to get us on the camera. Flashing lights, though I ain't the flashy type. I just push a big whips with the fastest pipes. Can't match his price, I don't nigga catch for life, but I still never pay the full package price. And fuck the laws, they can suck these balls. I'll be riding the fly shit till I rust the walls, yeah. So pull up, nigga, what? Please stay, get pulled up in the trunk, and my bass gon' bump. The thing I pack at my waist make your face go slump. Put me on the track, watch your place go dumb. T-O-R-O-N-T on the place I'm from.
Fresh dressed, living large, German whips in my garage. Most my partners caught to charge for all this love like elder bars. Fresh dressed, living